In 1966, Tallahassee was a postcard-perfect southern town. Church bells chimed on Sunday mornings, children rode the bikes through tree-lined streets, and people seldom locked their doors at night. But all of that changed with a single act of unimaginable horror. A mother, father, and one of their daughters were brutally murdered inside their own home, leaving behind a trail of questions that still haunt the city to this day. No signs of forced entry, no clear motive, and worst of all, no one has ever been held accountable. This is the story of the Sims family murders. Hello, friends. My name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders. At the time, Tallahassee, Florida's capital city, was a blend of Southern tradition and modern progress, nestled in Florida's Panhandle. Home to both Florida State University and Florida A&M University, it had a strong academic and middle-class presence. Though national issues like the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement echoed in the background, Tallahassee residents largely felt insulated from big city unrest. Robert W. Sims, age 42, was a U.S. Army veteran having served in World War II. Tall and handsome, he was a nationally known computer expert with the Florida State Department of Education and had recently been promoted to the Director of Data Processing. His wife, 37-year-old Helen, worked as secretary at the First Baptist Church of Tallahassee. Tall and elegant, Helen was known for her quiet grace. They had 3 daughters, 17-year-old Norma Jeanette, who everyone called Virginia, 16-year-old Judith, and 12-year-old Joy Lynn. The Sims family was described as cautious, polite, and deeply private. They lived at 641 Muriel Court in an upper-middle-class neighborhood called Parkside on the city's northeast side. On the evening of Saturday, October 22, 1966, most of Tallahassee was preoccupied with the Florida State versus Mississippi State football game. If you weren't at the game, you were somewhere watching it. Robert and Helen stayed home to listen to the game on the radio, while young Joy Lynn worked on a paint-by-number set at a small dining table. Their 2 oldest daughters, Virginia and Judy, were out babysitting for neighbors. Shortly after 11 p.m., Virginia was dropped off at home by the family she had babysat for. Nothing seemed unusual at first, as she went to her room to put away some books she had been reading while babysitting. The television was on, a radio was softly playing in another room, and the house lights glowed as usual. But something felt off. It was eerily quiet. Opening the door to her parents' bedroom, she was met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Her father lay mortally wounded on the blood-stained bed. Her mother and sister lay on the floor. Realizing her mother was still alive, Virginia quickly removed the gag from her mouth and hurried to summon help. Instead of dialing 911, which didn't exist in 1966, Virginia called the local funeral home, a grim but common practice during emergencies, asking that an ambulance be dispatched quickly, stating, "Something terrible's happened. Please come quickly." Russell Beavis, the funeral home owner, and his 16-year-old son, R.J. Rocky Beavis, were the first to arrive. Finding Robert barely alive and Joy already dead, they called police. Seeing Helen was still clinging to life, Beavis carried her to the ambulance. Returning to the bedroom, he found Robert had succumbed to his injuries. Helen was rushed to Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, having suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head and 1 to the leg. She never regained consciousness and died a few days later. Autopsies revealed that Robert and Joy had been shot in the head. Joy had also been stabbed multiple times. All 3 victims were bound with neckties and hosiery and gagged. Robert and Helen were blindfolded. Robert wore pants and an undershirt. Helen was fully dressed. Joy wore a nightgown. All were barefoot. There was no sign of sexual assault. Yet despite this violence, the house was undisturbed. There were no signs of forced entry. Robert's wallet was still on the bureau, so investigators quickly ruled out robbery. The murder weapons appeared to be a .38 caliber firearm and a long, double-edged knife. Tallahassee police had never dealt with a crime of this magnitude. Jurisdictional conflicts between city and county officers led to a severely compromised crime scene. Officers, neighbors, and even curious onlookers walked through the home. Evidence was trampled. Souvenirs were taken. At one point, officers even made coffee in the Sims kitchen. Unidentified fingerprints were found, but the damage to the scene had already been done. Due to Robert's position with the state, Florida Governor Hayden Burns took a personal interest in the case. The investigation became one of the largest in Florida's history. Over 6,000 interviews were conducted across 23 states. A $16,000 reward was offered. Despite this effort, no motive, no witnesses, and no murder weapon was ever found. The impact on the community was immediate and profound. Halloween was canceled. Parents were urged to keep their children off the streets. Residents, particularly on the north side, were told to lock their doors, and there was a run on locks and guns reported by hardware and variety stores. A prowler squad, made up of roving teams of officers and police dogs, operated all over the city to ensure quick response to any prowler calls. A joint funeral for father and daughter was held at the Webb Funeral Home, officiated by Pastor C.A. Roberts. They were returned to Mississippi and buried in the Hebron Baptist Church Cemetery in Lauderdale County. Funeral services for Helen were held at the First Baptist Church. She was also returned to Mississippi, where she was laid to rest next to her husband and daughter. Orphaned by the crime, Virginia and Judy went to live with their maternal aunt, Mrs. James Carr, in Huntsville, Alabama. 32 officers spent 12 days questioning 700 individuals after a woman in Brevard County claimed she overheard a man on a party line saying, "Mother, I've done a horrible thing. I've killed 3 persons." No tangible evidence was ever produced. Robert Howells was also briefly suspected when his ex-wife Peggy reported that he had confessed to the murders, citing a petty slight by Helen at the grocery store as the motive. Police investigated, but there was no evidence to tie him to the crime. He was given a polygraph test, which he passed. Thomas Fulgram, who was 15 at the time of the murders, went to Leon High School with the Sims children. His family lived 2 blocks from the Sims home, and investigators found it suspicious that he made a point of being away from home when they came to interview the family. Eventually, police determined that Thomas was at a party, and he was seen by several witnesses. Years later, investigators would look at Thomas again when he was charged with killing a 25-year-old Atlanta woman and had developed a history of psychiatric problems. However, no evidence tied him to the Sims case, and his solid alibi eliminated him as a suspect. The police and many in the community also felt C.A. Roberts, pastor of the Tallahassee First Baptist Church, was a viable suspect. Helen had abruptly resigned her position as secretary of the church just days before the killings. Known to be charismatic and engaging, Roberts had numerous affairs with women in the community. Believing they may be caught up in a murder investigation, many of these women came forward in the days immediately following the murders to confirm their affairs. It has been widely reported that Helen, too, may have been having an affair with Roberts. However, police have never found evidence that this was true. While the reason Helen left her position is not known, police theorized she may have rejected or threatened to expose him. However, he had an airtight alibi. He was seen on camera during the game as team chaplain for Florida State University. Though ruled out, suspicions lingered. He was later deordained and died in a car crash in 1978. Finally, 2 local teenagers remain unofficial suspects. Mary Charles LaJoy, a student at Leon High School at the time of the murders, had a disturbing fascination with death, spending considerable time at local funeral homes, asking graphic questions, and eventually breaking in to steal shrouds to sleep in. Her behavior was so bizarre that Russell Beavis asked her to stop coming around his funeral home. Although he was 19 and attending some college classes, Mary's boyfriend, Vernon B. Fox, didn't work and had no car. He depended on the money his mother gave him to take Mary on dates. During their initial investigation, police noticed a correlation between the number of prowler calls when Vernon was in the area versus when he was not. A week prior to the murders, he had been spotted by neighbors in the Sims' backyard, peeping in at Joy Lynn. Although they claimed to be at a drive-in movie until late that night, the ticket taker, who knew both of them, reported that they left early. A neighbor, Mrs. Lamb, reported seeing Vernon on the street, acting oddly after the police arrived. Mary and Vernon would become the focus again when in 1987, Sheriff Larry Campbell received a phone call from Mary because she had seen an article that led her to believe she was going to be arrested for the murders. Kyle Jones, a student at Florida State University, produced a documentary on the murders for a school project. The film, 641 Muriel Court, includes parts of Mary's 1987 video interview with Sheriff Campbell, and I have linked it below. As for Vernon, he has always denied involvement, though his stories about that night have changed over the years. Mary? Well, I encourage you to watch the documentary and decide for yourself. In 2016, former prosecutor Jeremy Mutz claimed he was fired for pursuing leads in the case. Former state attorney Willie Meggs said Mutz was terminated for using his position to gain information to write a book about the murders and was inappropriately contacting witnesses. Mutz denied the claims. Nearly 6 decades have passed since the night the Sims family was silenced, but the weight of their unsolved murders still lingers in Tallahassee's memory, like a ghost that refuses to rest. Those who remember say the neighborhood never truly recovered its sense of innocence. In the end, the most disturbing part isn't just what happened to Robert, Helen, and Joy. It's that someone, somewhere, knows exactly what happened and has chosen silence over justice. Until that silence is broken, the case of the Sims family remains one of Florida's most haunting mysteries. If you have any thoughts or theories about this case, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.